meet a really hot, exotic woman who can kick your ass. And she's like, I know her.
Yeah.
She's on Grey's
All the
Anatomy. Yeah, she
time.
kicks my ass all the time.
Yeah.
She gave me a bruise like last Tuesday.
Should we take some questions from the audience? We'll do like hand raising style, I guess, because otherwise I won't know if you have a question.
We can hear if you just want to.
When I first saw the video for Spaniards, which was this like a condensed version of this, and seeing it tonight, the blindness is what really strikes me the most, the blindness of the character. I was just wondering if you could just kind of discuss what that might mean to you,
Sure.
because it just seems like such an important visual
Yeah.
like thing. And
Well, through the years, I've done a certain amount of work where I find a myth that I'm very attracted to, and then I trust the spine of the myth. So in the myth of Orion, the character is blinded, and then you assume that this sort of has a sort of story trajectory. And so to us in the thing, in the myth of Orion, when Orion is blinded, when he regains his sight, he attempts to destroy every creature on Earth. So how I read the myth was like, he's given the gift of new sight, but rather than appreciate it, he's bent on destroying. And I think in relating it to my own weird life story, I look back at 50 now where I see I had a tremendous amount of opportunities at a very young age, and rather than say, wow, I'm so grateful to be here, thank you for this opportunity, I would think like every time somebody gave me more light, it's like it just fueled like a weird sort of destructive narcissism. It's like it sort of inverts at some point. And I read it to mean like if a person isn't centered in their animal nature, that's what happens. They sort of spin out of control. And then even if you want to draw a parallel to modern life, in the narcissistic culture that we have that is basically being shored up by social media companies, they're very invested in convincing an average person who's probably not neurotic to think that they're a demigod because they have a phone and a hashtag or something. That in essence we're seeing what I, in my own parlance, would call the unchecked id. We're seeing a lot of unchecked ids. It's like totally normal people who are suddenly given access to a power that it's not their own power, but because somebody's willing to harness that power for an even greater evil, that we see these unchecked hits, and it turns, whether it's violence or random people attacking random people just because it makes them feel good. It's like, I don't know, I want to babble on because but I think that's sort of where my brain goes. It's like, so in the movie, when Harry's given the gift of sight, he loses his mind. He doesn't say, oh my God, I'm so lucky. It's like, now I'm going to wreak vengeance. And that's, I certainly can resonate with that concept.
Me too. It's like, I feel like people who are in traumatic situations, the trauma either compounds and you carry it on, or you learn to release it and become something greater. For me, I was putting a lot of like a trauma response into that too. Yeah, into the myth.
What made you pick that time period for the film in the beginning?
I started flirting with the idea of making a film called Pillbox when my partner was pregnant with our son Augustus, and we actually shot some footage. I was sort of obsessed with the idea of a pillbox, and even though a pillbox is more related to World War II, there's something about the brutality of World War I, and it's really kind of strange because World War I was incredibly traumatic. In fact, I recently found out that my family that came from Belgium came over to America because of the trauma of World War I. They were Belgian, and their village was so literally destroyed to rubble that they were like, well, we might as well just go to America. It was like one of those things. So I'm here because of that sort of trauma. But I wasn't thinking that in fact, I didn't know it when I wrote the story. But there's World War I is, there's a lot of talk with the baby boomers. Speaking of narcissism, World War II is this, and it's hard to diminish a war, but World War I was just as important in a different set of reasons, and it was the introduction of trench warfare, which up until that point, warfare was almost this kind of, whether it was the Prussians or something, it was this idea there was sort of a noble, or you see it with the Japanese, the way they'd have tea and then they'd kill each other. you know, World War I was the introduction of this level of barbarity that was, you know, heretofore not seen. And so there's something about that brutality that I think sort of attracted me, because they literally were just sending guys into this death maw. And I don't know, you know, not to go on about the same stuff, there's a lot of parallels to me about what we're going through in modern society. We're sending a lot of people to weird, chemically induced, hypnotic induced deaths, and people are just standing by sort of saying, well, that's life. You know, it's kind of weird to me. There's a sort of a loss of humanity that's kind of almost become a norm. And we even see it with these horrible, violent things that have happened. It's like our ability to accept and sort of kind of move on from violence so quickly is actually a sign of insanity. It's not a sign of strength, it's a sign of insanity. Like what happened in Vegas, that's something you know, we should as a culture should be examining for months and months and months, and it's already sort of become like, oh yeah, and then it's nowhere in the conspiracy theory. And you know, it's like, it spins into something a lot quicker because we spin off the trauma. And I think we're getting adept at sort of normalizing things that human systems are not designed to normalize, which is why people lose their minds. Anybody else? Yes, please.
So, not relevant to the film, but the album itself is just incredibly soft and beautiful. And do you think becoming a father, becoming a parent, has transitioned your music into something even more soft and beautiful than ever before?
That's a good question. I've been asked that a lot, and I don't feel that at all.
Okay.
I made an acoustic album in 2004 that I never put out. And since I recorded Ojilal, I've actually written another acoustic record, but I haven't recorded it yet. I just think it's a longer thing, but like we're friends, right? So
In my head, we are.
we are friends. When I would play acoustic music through the years behind the scenes, going back to when I was taking a lot of LSD and writing like songs for Gish, and a lot of my intentional focus on writing was we're this nobody band in this nothing town, and we've got to get the fuck out of here. So what do I have to do to make people pay attention to us? So I was always subverting that side of my music, but when I would play that type of music for my friends, they would be like, well, I didn't know you could sing like that. Like, and literally I heard the same song for 25 years, like, why don't you release this music? And I actually took the step, and Linda was around during that period of when I made my first acoustic record, the one that hasn't come out. And I was like, I was all ready to finally introduce it in the world. That would have been 13, 14 years ago. And I was in a bad situation with the label, and I went to hand it in, and I went, nope, no thanks, boom, back on the shelf. And I made the weird, you know, Future Embrace, which was like the complete antithesis of what I was doing. Again, sort of going behind a mask, because I can't just deal, it almost took me to, and this maybe does intersect with your question, it almost took being a father and being 50 years old to say, okay, I don't really care what people think anymore. I didn't have the courage to release music like this, which is weird, because I did songs like this along the way, but it was always sort of hidden and cloaked between other music. And now, and obviously Rick had a lot to do with it, just having the courage to make music that's really probably more my style and more even my skill set, which is weird because I'm known as the rat in the cage guy. And I always feel like they're talking about somebody else, like, and they don't understand that I was being ironic and making fun of them, but that's for another decade.